This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast. I am Chris Graham, and I'm talking with Scott German, and we're going to talk some UVA sports. Big news is the bowl bid. We knew it was coming because after the win over Georgia Tech back in November, the Cavs had their 6th win, and that meant bowl eligibility. We've just been waiting on pins and needles ever since to find out where the destination was. And we've heard about the Military Bowl way back, even around that time of the Georgia Tech win. That's the destination. Virginia playing in the Military Bowl against Navy, a very familiar opponent. Of course, we share the history of George Welsh with Navy. We used to play an ongoing series with the midshipmen back in the 80s and 90s as well. And so Scott, it's been a while since these two teams have played, but we know each other a lot. We could call this the George Welsh Bowl, I suppose. When you saw this news yesterday, what were your first thoughts?
Oh, I was extremely pleased. I would have rather maybe gone to the bowl in Charlotte, but for some reason that went too late. Not sure exactly. Maybe we could know a little bit more about how that came about. But this is a good bowl. It's it's close to home. UVA, from what I've seen on the message boards today and from the Military Bowl website, they set a new single-day record as far as tickets sold, so it should be a sellout. It's a great venue, Chris. I've been there twice to see Virginia play, and it is a magnificent venue. Now, whether it's going to be magnificent on the 28th of December, that's another story. It might be a little chilly, but they do a great job at the Naval Academy. It's a very pomp and circumstance type of event for a football game. Not sure if maybe the midshipmen will be there in full force, but I would imagine they will be. It's a great bowl for Virginia. As far as bowls go, they're all now pretty much exhibitions once you get past the Final Four playoffs, and so this is a chance for Virginia to kind of rejuvenate themselves and maybe the fan base. Just rejuvenate the fan base by showing that they will turn out and support the program in postseason play, and hopefully a good effort there. And the ticket office can build on that in the off season as far as selling more tickets for to the 2018 season.
Yeah, and I can see there are a few reasons why these tickets are going the way they are, which. That's the one-day bowl record is obviously good news for Virginia football and for Navy football and for the Military Bowl people too. Among them, these two schools have ties. As we mentioned, George Welsh was the coach at Navy. When he left Navy, he was the all-time winningest coach there. The current coach, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name, has overtaken Welsh in that respect. But Welsh had won 55 games there in his 8 seasons, and it took Navy to 3 bowls in his last 4 seasons, back when there weren't nearly as many bowls, and going to a bowl meant something. And then, of course, at Virginia, 19 seasons, he's the all-time winningest coach at Virginia. And so there's a natural tie between the two schools. And I mentioned because of George Welsh's status as a head coach at both schools, Virginia and Navy played a series ongoing until the mid-'90s, and then that fell away. But, and also, Virginia's got a huge alum base in the D.C. region, and this isn't that far from the D.C. area. So, Northern Virginia, D.C. This should be, at least from a weather standpoint, it's 1:30 in the afternoon. At least they're not going to make folks sit out there at night in a northern game. That's used to be the bowl season was you went south, you played somewhere warm. Well, now with these games in places like Annapolis, the Pinstripe Bowl up in up in New York, the game in Detroit, which is at least indoors, but still you gotta get to that game. It's at least we're playing outside, or at least during the day outside. So I don't know. I guess that's the best possible situation for that game. But yeah, it should be the venue itself, the tradition of the game, the tradition of the Naval Academy, the tradition of these two schools knowing each other so well. Should be a good matchup and a really a kind of a good made for TV, made for bowl game kind of atmosphere as far as this game goes.
And kind of ironic, Navy still has the game to play. Just saying it like that, a game to play. It's the biggest game in Navy. They're on their schedule every year. the Army-Navy game next Saturday. So if anyone wants to get kind of a scouting report on Navy, they can tune into CBS and watch that game. That should be just a great game. I think Army might actually, rarely be favored over the Naval Academy. I've always wondered why Virginia Navy did not play more often, because it is a great venue. You depend upon the alumni base that UVA has up in the D.C. area. It's an easy drive from just about anywhere on the eastern seaboard. Navy represents, a pretty good challenge every year, but when Virginia gets back to full speed again, it's a game that you would think that a strong ACC team should win, whether it's on the home field or away. But for some reason, they got away from that. I don't know exactly what the logistics were or what the reasons were as far as why they're not playing on a regular basis instead of playing, Oregon State and some of these Boise State. That I wish it would continue again, and maybe this is the kind of scenario that would prompt these two teams to get together, these two schools, whatever, to get together again and start playing one another on a more regular basis.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I don't know if this is the case. This is before I was a reporter, more when I was a student at UVA. But they played an annual series back in those days. I graduated from UVA in 1994, and those games were not competitive. Navy was not a competitive program for a long time. Now, as they are competitive, it would be a great series. And in fact, they're more competitive than Virginia is. That would be. It would be interesting if this could rekindle that down the line. I know schedules are made out years in advance in a lot of cases, but you have holes, and you can certainly, look at this and say, a chance to get these two programs back together. I'll point out some game facts. I haven't really studied Navy. We'll all get a chance to, as Scott pointed out this weekend, when Army plays Navy in that big rivalry game. But both these teams at this stage have lost 5 of their last 6. Virginia, of course, started 5-1. We know that well. Lost 5 of their last 6 to finish 6-6. Navy started 5-0, and then now they're 6-5. Now, they play in the American Athletic Conference, which means they played a close game and lost to Central Florida. They played a tight game with Memphis. They also, non-conference, played a tight game with Notre Dame. So, they've lost 5 games, but, they played a tough schedule in the last half of the season. Played those teams competitively. Now, Virginia, of course, also lost their last 3 to teams ranked in the top 20, Louisville and Virginia Tech and Miami, all in the FPI, the Football Power Index top 20. So these two teams battle-tested. They didn't beat the teams on their schedule that are ranked and competitive in that sense. But I think these are two well-matched teams. It's not like there's a discrepancy with one team ranked ahead of the other, or that much better than the other. In that sense, I think that you'll see it. You should see a competitive game. I'll also throw this out there, Scott. We've kind of seen this before, and I wonder if the Georgia Tech game prepares us for this game better than, say, if we had not played Georgia Tech this season. Navy runs the triple option. They run it better than Georgia Tech, if you want to say that. They averaging 347 yards a game on the ground, second in Division 1A football to Army at that game this weekend. Don't expect a lot of passes this weekend in Philadelphia. Those two teams will run some more. But so Virginia's played a team that plays like Navy. They get a chance to watch them, up close and personal this weekend, knowing they'll play them in a couple of weeks. And again, I wonder if that Georgia Tech game maybe prepares Virginia for Navy better than if they hadn't played a team like that all season.
Well, I think it has to. It gives, Virginia has seen that type of offense. You're right. Navy runs an identical offense, even better than Georgia Tech, especially this year. So it's not something that Coach Mendenhall is going to have to spend that much extra time on preparing them for that. So, yeah, I think it's just common sense would tell you it's better than going up against an offense an unusual type offense that not everybody runs, that you can't prepare for on a weekly basis. I think it has to be a huge benefit for UVA. And, we'll see. Navy has a game Saturday, so their actual preparation time for Virginia is going to be a little less than what UVA is going to have to prepare for Navy. But then again, Navy's still playing competitive football, the biggest game of their season, so that should kind of offset that lack of preparation time that they'll have for UVA. They're going to still be, pretty fresh off of a pretty intense game when December 28th comes around.
Yeah, and I wondered. So I was going to ask that next. And kind of bring that topic up. My thought is that, you can look at it as an advantage that Virginia has more time to prepare. Also, though, they sort of went into hiding after the Black Friday game. I mean, they haven't played a competitive football game since, the 24th. It'll be over a month between competitive football games for Virginia, whereas for Navy, it's a couple weeks. And so, I don't know. I mean, do you have rust that first quarter when you get out there? I mean, maybe you do. On the other side, maybe Navy could have used an extra little bit of time to prepare. But I don't know. I kind of tend to favor the team that doesn't have that long period of time off. I always think that's a disadvantage to teams having that long period of time off. It's almost like that first quarter is a feeling out process. Like, oh yeah, we got to tackle each other again. We got to block again. Practice speed is not quite the same as game speed, and I think that could be an advantage for Navy going in.
That's my thought, is that they're going to play this Saturday, which is, I guess, the 8th, 9th, and then within less than 3 weeks they're going to play that bowl game, so they're going to be a little sharper. But then again, I guess the other school of thought is that Virginia Tech will have had plenty of time to kind of focus on Navy and Navy alone. But I'm not going to tell you I keep up with Navy football. I do read somewhat about Navy football because I subscribe to the Baltimore Sun, and they give Navy football a great deal of coverage. And the one little blurb I read about Navy going into this coming Saturday's game against Army is that they, for the most part this season, they've been an underachieving team, but a team that seems to play better on a big stage. And you mentioned the loss, the very close loss at Notre Dame. So I guess, we're going to probably get their best shot because even though it's the Military Bowl, it's not a gigantic stage, it is for both of these teams. National TV and a chance for Navy to kind of, no pun intended here, right their ship a little bit. So, it's a great matchup. It may be one of the best matchups in that short history of the Military Bowl, and I'm sure they are very excited about getting that matchup this year.
And our fan base hasn't been to a bowl since 2011, so that's a chance for our people to get out there and cheer in a game in December, and close to home too. So that's Thursday, December 28th, and of course we'll have a lot of coverage leading up to that, previews and etc. leading up to that. But it is exciting news for Virginia. We knew the Cavs were going to a bowl. It's just now they get to they know where it is, and it's not Detroit, it's not El Paso, it's close to home. So Virginia Navy, that's going to be exciting. Now we'll switch gears real quick and talk some UVA basketball. Rankings out today. USA Today coaches poll has Virginia 12th. That's a season high. Of course, the Virginia started not ranked, so 8-0 record. And now that's going to be on the line, obviously, tomorrow night. And West Virginia also ranked in the top 15 in the country. And we've seen this team the last couple of years. Each of these two programs have seen each other the last couple of years. Virginia won the game 2 years ago up in Madison Square Garden, the coaches, the Jimmy V Classic game on a neutral court. Now, West Virginia won the game last year in Charlottesville. And then this year, the return trip for Virginia, fleshing out the 3-game series in Morgantown. 7 o'clock tip Tuesday night. And, to me, this is a great series. I love what Tony Bennett and I guess Bob Huggins, obviously on his side of this equation as well, are doing here. Seeking out a top opponent in your backyard. Most teams don't do this time of year. A lot of folks won't go and play, like last year, Huggins playing in Charlottesville. This year, Bennett playing in Morgantown. Two tough environments to play in for road teams. So you got to like it that Tony is willing to go out there and schedule this game from Virginia's perspective And I don't want to get the fans' hopes up too much. I mean, yeah, this is a game Virginia, we know this program. We know West Virginia's personnel. They're a senior-laden team. We've seen these guys around. But it's going to be a tough place to play. Kansas doesn't win in this place too often. Virginia's going to have a hard time tomorrow night, no question about that. If Virginia pulls this one off, credit to UVA basketball, because that will be a huge win for this program. But even just playing well, I think, is a goal to come out of this. Play well, get yourself ready for down the line, because that West Virginia environment may be the toughest environment Virginia plays in all season.
Well, with maybe the exception of that Duke, maybe, but that Morgantown is it's not a real big arena. I've been in it, but not for a basketball game. It's kind of compact. The fans are right on the floor. And our win against West Virginia 2 years ago did not come at Morgantown. It came in Charleston at the Civic Center. So it was kind of not a neutral site, but it wasn't on WVU's home floor.
It was actually in Madison Square Garden. It was actually in the Garden.
Was it at Madison Square Garden?
Yeah, it was actually at the Garden. Yeah.
So this is. For some reason I was thinking it was in Charleston, because they were renovating their arena 2 years ago, and yeah, you're right. It was in Madison Square Garden. It's a great early season matchup. I would like to see something like this played every year. I read something recently that that Virginia was in negotiations with a contract with Maryland, and I think that would be a disastrous idea. I don't think they owe Maryland anything in any sport to play them, but WVU puts them in a hostile environment, and it's a relatively short trip, so it's kind of playing with house money at this stage of the game. If they lose, it could be very much of a learning experience for them to build on, and boy, another win on the road would really give them another jolt of confidence.
Yeah, this environment will be tougher than Duke. I've been to games at Duke. I tend to think Duke's overrated as an environment. I've been to several games there. I've never been for a Duke Carolina game there, so I imagine that environment's pretty hype. But I've been to Duke Virginia games in Cameron, and there were empty seats. So West Virginia there will not be empties for this game. The backyard rivalry. These two programs don't meet very often. The football series ended back in the 80s. They played that bowl game back in the mid 2000s. There's bitterness between these two schools. The fan base of these two schools. And that's another neat part of this basketball series getting going. And plus, these two programs are so they're both with what Huggins has done at West Virginia. He's got an identity there. Of course, he's a native guy, but he's built an identity with that press defense, that 40, the 40 minutes of 94 feet press defense, and and of course, what Virginia does is so different defensively. But they're two teams that hang their hats on defense, and so it won't be pretty tomorrow night. It won't be quite like the Wisconsin game last week in terms of, if you're expecting 80 or 90 points, you might get it combined, but It'll be if you're a basketball junkie, you get to see two very distinct ways and very different ways of how to play top-notch defense displayed tomorrow night on that court. It'll really be interesting to see who kind of asserts their will early and then is able to control the tempo of this game.
Yeah, if you're looking for a 90-point game, you might get it. With a score of about 51 to 49 or something like that. It's not going to be a real high-scoring game. And another thing, this probably plays right into Tony's mentality, is you want to play a team like WVU that plays that type of pressing defense, man-to-man, full court. It just gives you a little more preparation for what's going to lie ahead, as the rest of the ACC or the ACC schedule, which is just around the corner, not that far off if you look ahead a little bit.
Yeah, and I kind of like I said about the football, Virginia and the Virginia football team having played Georgia Tech, getting ready for Navy, a team that plays triple option. Virginia's already played a team this year, VCU, that plays full court defense for 40 minutes, and so now I think West Virginia plays it better, but they've at least already had a chance to prepare and play a 40-minute game, and actually did well in that game, if you recall. I mean, Virginia did not just won the game, but only had 5 turnovers against VCU in that environment on the road in Richmond. So perhaps we'll see the dividends of that. But, yeah, you're right. Getting ready for ACC play, and that's, bringing up that VCU game. I mean, you go on the road in November, you play at VCU, you win that game. In December, you go on the road, play at Morgantown. Win or lose, as far as I'm concerned, that gets you ready for at Duke. That gets you ready for, I think the schedule has an at North Carolina game this year. I'm not sure. I know there's a home game. There might not be a road contest there, but it gets you ready for Syracuse and Louisville and things like that. So it should be a good test. And so that's at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. We'll have a live blog during the game, and Scott and I will powwow afterwards and talk about the game and recap it and such after the fact. So check out AFP for that. And, later this week we'll probably talk some more UVA basketball on a podcast here, and also a little more detail looking at Navy football as well. So I think I'll go ahead and sign us off. For Scott German, I'm Chris Graham. This has been Street Knowledge. Thanks, everybody, for listening.